Sorry, this table's for family only, my sister smirked, pointing toward a fold-out chair by the trash can. Everyone laughed as I sat alone. Then the bill arrived, $5,100. The waiter looked at me. I just smiled and said, "Not my table." I, 32M, never thought my own sister would humiliate me like this, but I guess family can surprise you in the worst ways possible. What started as a celebration dinner turned into the most satisfying revenge I've ever served cold. The whole mess began 3 weeks ago when I got the promotion I'd been working toward for 5 years. Senior project manager at one of the biggest tech firms in the city, complete with a salary bump that finally put me in 6 figures. I was proud as hell and wanted to celebrate with the people who mattered most, my family. My sister had always been the golden child. 2 years younger, married to a successful lawyer, living in their McMansion in the suburbs with their 2 perfect kids. She'd made it clear over the years that she thought my career in tech support was beneath her social circle. The snide comments, the way she'd introduce me at parties as her brother who worked with computers, it all stung, but I'd learned to brush it off. When I called to share the news about my promotion, she seemed genuinely happy for me. She suggested we celebrate at Vincenzo's, this upscale Italian place downtown that I'd never been to but had heard was incredible. The kind of place where dinner for 2 could easily run $300. She insisted on making the reservation and said she'd invite our parents and her husband too, make it a real family affair. I should have known something was up when she said she'd handle everything. The night arrived, and I dressed in my best suit, the one I'd bought for job interviews that had finally paid off. I got to Vincenzo's 15 minutes early, excited to share my news properly and maybe finally earn some respect from my family. The hostess looked at me confused when I mentioned the reservation under my sister's name. She made a phone call, then led me through the restaurant. That's when I saw them. My entire family seated at this gorgeous table by the window, already halfway through their appetizers. My parents, my sister, her husband, even my teenage nephew and niece. They were laughing about something, wine glasses already filled, the warm glow of the restaurant lighting making them look like a perfect family portrait. Except there was no empty chair. My sister spotted me first. Her face lit up with this smile that I initially thought was genuine excitement. But looking back, I can see it was something else entirely. She waved me over with exaggerated enthusiasm. And that's when she delivered the line that would change everything between us forever. She pointed toward a folding chair that had been set up right next to the service station, practically touching the swinging doors to the kitchen. The kind of cheap plastic chair you'd find at a garage sale, completely out of place in this elegant restaurant. It was positioned so awkwardly that the busboys had to squeeze around it every time they came through with their trays. "Sorry," she said with that smirk. "This table was for family only." She gestured toward the folding chair like she was doing me some great favor by providing seating at all. The entire table erupted in laughter. My brother-in-law nearly spit out his wine. My teenage nephew, who I'd helped with his computer problems countless times, was practically doubled over. Even my parents were chuckling, though my mother at least had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. I stood there for a moment, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. Other diners were starting to stare. The humiliation was complete and total. But instead of making a scene, I walked over to that ridiculous chair and sat down. The plastic creaked under my weight, and I had to pull my knees up because there wasn't enough room between me and the service station. My sister launched into this elaborate story about her husband's latest case, some high-profile corporate lawsuit that had made the local news. Everyone hung on every word while I sat there like some kind of unwanted stepchild, occasionally getting bumped by servers carrying trays of food to actual customers at actual tables. They ordered course after course. Appetizers, salads, multiple entrees to share, expensive wine, cocktails, dessert. My sister kept making these little comments about how nice it was to have family together, how successful everyone was doing, how proud she was of the life they'd all built. Each comment felt like a deliberate jab, reminding me of my place in the hierarchy. I ordered a simple pasta dish and water, not because I couldn't afford more, but because I was starting to form a plan and I needed to think clearly. The conversation eventually turned to my promotion, but even that got twisted around. My sister congratulated me on finally getting a real job, as if everything I'd done before had been playing around. Her husband made some comment about how nice it must be to not have the pressure of real responsibility, the kind of stress that comes with important clients and major decisions. They talked about my new position like it was a participation trophy. All through dinner, I watched them carefully. I studied their behavior, their casual cruelty, the way they'd built this little bubble of superiority and decided I didn't belong inside it. I made mental notes of everything they ordered, every expensive bottle of wine, every premium add-on they couldn't resist. The evening dragged on for over 2 hours. By the end, the table was covered with empty plates and glasses, evidence of their indulgence. They were all slightly tipsy and in high spirits, clearly pleased with their little power play. That's when the waiter approached with the check. I'd been watching him too. This professional young man who'd been nothing but courteous despite having to navigate around my ridiculous seating arrangement all evening. He'd clearly been briefed on the table situation, probably by my sister when she made the reservation. He knew exactly what was happening. The waiter placed the check directly in front of me with a polite smile, and I could see the total from where I sat. $5,137.43. My sister had really gone all out. Multiple bottles of wine that cost more than most people's rent, premium steaks, lobster, the works. The table went quiet. Everyone was looking at me with these expectant expressions, like they were waiting for me to have some kind of breakdown. My sister had that same smirk from earlier, probably thinking this was the perfect capstone to her evening of entertainment. I looked at the check, then at the waiter, then at my so-called family. I picked up the receipt, glanced at it once more, and set it back down on the table. Then I told the waiter calmly that this wasn't my table. The silence that followed was beautiful. My sister's smirk vanished instantly. Her husband's face went pale. My parents looked confused, then panicked. The waiter, to his credit, maintained his professional composure, but I could see he was trying not to smile. I stood up from my plastic chair, pulled out my wallet, and placed a $20 bill on the edge of their table, enough to cover my pasta and water, plus tip. Then I explained to everyone within earshot exactly what had happened. I told them how my sister had invited me to celebrate my promotion, then deliberately humiliated me by making me sit apart from the family table like some kind of unwanted guest. I mentioned how they'd spent the entire evening reminding me that I didn't belong, that I wasn't successful enough, that I wasn't really part of their circle. My voice carried in the quiet restaurant. Other diners were definitely listening now, and I could see some of them looking at my family with disgust. My sister tried to interrupt, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but I wasn't finished. I told everyone that since I apparently wasn't family enough to sit at their table, I wasn't family enough to pay their bill either. Then I wished them a lovely evening and walked toward the exit. The chaos that erupted behind me was everything I could have hoped for. My sister was frantically calling my name, her voice cracking with panic. Her husband was demanding to speak to the manager. My parents were trying to figure out what was happening and why I was abandoning them. But the most satisfying part was hearing my sister try to explain to the waiter that there had been some mistake, that of course I was part of the family, that the seating arrangement was just due to space constraints. The waiter, bless him, simply repeated that I'd made it very clear this wasn't my table, and that someone would need to settle the bill. I didn't look back as I walked out of Vincenzo's, but I could hear the argument escalating behind me. My sister's voice getting higher and more desperate, her husband trying to take control of the situation, my parents asking confused questions about what exactly had been going on all evening. I drove home in the best mood I'd had in years. Update 1. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. My phone started ringing before I even got home, but I let everything go to voicemail. By the time I finally listened to the messages the next morning, I had 17 missed calls and a dozen text messages ranging from angry to panic to pleading. My sister's first few messages were furious. She accused me of embarrassing the family, of being petty and vindictive, of ruining what was supposed to be a celebration. Her husband left a voicemail threatening legal action, though I'm not sure what law he thought I'd broken by refusing to pay for dinner I didn't order at a table where I wasn't welcome. But as the evening wore on, the tone of the messages changed. My sister started calling back with a different energy, trying to explain that the seating thing was just a joke, that everyone knew I was part of the family, that I was being too sensitive. She claimed they'd assumed I would understand it was all in fun. My parents called too, confused and upset. They wanted to know what had happened, why I'd left them with such an enormous bill, how they were supposed to explain this to my sister's in-laws who apparently had to be called in to help cover the cost. That last detail was particularly satisfying. My sister and her husband, for all their posturing about success and important careers, apparently couldn't cover a $5,000 dinner bill on their own. They'd had to call her father-in-law at 11 at night to come bail them out. The same father-in-law who my sister was always trying to impress, who she'd probably told countless stories about our family dynamics over the years. I didn't return any of the calls that first day. I wanted them to sit with the consequences of their actions, to really understand what they'd done and why it had backfired so spectacularly. When I finally did call my parents back, they were surprisingly understanding once I explained the whole story. My mother admitted she'd felt uncomfortable with the seating arrangement but hadn't wanted to cause a scene. My father was actually angry at my sister, saying he'd raised us better than to treat family that way. They told me what happened after I left. My sister had a complete meltdown in the restaurant, screaming at the waiter and demanding to speak to the manager. She insisted there had been some mistake, that I was clearly part of their party, that the bill should be split or something. But the manager backed up his staff, pointing out that I'd been seated separately from their table, had ordered independently, and had paid for my own meal before leaving. The scene got ugly enough that other diners complained. Security was called, not to deal with me, but to handle my sister's outburst. She was ultimately told to settle the bill immediately or face trespassing charges. Her husband tried to negotiate, suggesting they could pay a portion now and arrange payment terms for the rest. But Vincenzo's doesn't work that way. It's a high-end establishment that expects payment in full, especially when dealing with customers who've just caused a scene. That's when they had to call the cavalry. Her father-in-law, a stern old-school type who'd apparently never liked my sister much anyway, had to leave his own dinner party to come downtown with his credit card. My parents said he looked absolutely furious when he arrived, and didn't say a word to my sister as he handed over payment. The humiliation was complete. Not only had my sister's little power play backfired, but she'd had to be rescued by the one person whose respect she cared about most. And she'd done it all in front of a restaurant full of witnesses who saw exactly what kind of person she really was. Update 2. The family drama continued to unfold over the following weeks. My sister tried various approaches to get me to reimburse her for the dinner, ranging from guilt trips to threats to attempted manipulation through our parents. Her first strategy was playing the victim. She called crying, claiming I'd ruined her reputation at her favorite restaurant, that she could never show her face there again. She painted the whole thing as a cruel overreaction on my part, conveniently leaving out the part where she deliberately humiliated me in front of the entire family. When that didn't work, she tried going through our parents. She told them I was being unreasonable, that families sometimes tease each other, that I should be the bigger person and help with the bill since I made good money now. Our parents, to their credit, told her she'd made her bed and needed to lie in it. Her husband took a different approach. He sent me a formal demand letter, written on his law firm's letterhead, requesting payment for my portion of the dinner bill. The letter was full of legal-sounding language about shared financial responsibility and family obligations. I responded by forwarding him a copy of my own receipt showing I'd paid for my meal, along with a brief note explaining that I couldn't be responsible for charges at a table where I wasn't seated. But the most interesting development came from my nephew. He was apparently so embarrassed by what happened that he called me directly to apologize. He said he hadn't realized how mean the joke was until he saw other people's reactions at the restaurant. He told me his friends at school had heard about it somehow, and they thought his family were jerks. This opened up a conversation I hadn't expected. My nephew admitted that his mother often made comments about me at home, usually about how I was the unsuccessful brother who couldn't get his life together. He'd grown up thinking I was some kind of failure, which explained why he'd found the restaurant scene so funny at first. But now that he was older and understood more about the world, he could see what had really happened. His mother had deliberately set me up for humiliation, and he felt terrible about participating. He asked if we could have dinner sometime, just the two of us, so he could get to know me better without his mother's commentary. I agreed, and we met at a casual place the following weekend. It was eye-opening to hear his perspective on our family dynamics. Apparently, my sister had been poisoning the well for years, constantly making little comments about my career, my lifestyle, my choices. She'd built this narrative where she was the successful one and I was the family disappointment. But my nephew was smart enough to see through it now. He asked about my work, my hobbies, my life, and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. We talked about his college plans, his girlfriend, his concerns about following in his father's footsteps. It was the best family conversation I'd had in years. He also filled me in on what was happening at home. Apparently, my sister was still furious about the restaurant incident, but she was also dealing with fallout from other directions. Her father-in-law had made some pointed comments about family values and fiscal responsibility. Her husband was embarrassed about having his colleagues see the demand letter situation, especially since other lawyers at his firm thought it was petty and unprofessional. Most importantly, word had spread through their social circle about what happened at Vincenzo's. The restaurant scene had been witnessed by several people they knew, and the story had grown in the telling. My sister, who prided herself on her social status and reputation, was now known as the woman who tried to stick her brother with a $5,000 bill after making him sit by the trash can. The irony was perfect. In trying to demonstrate my lower status in the family hierarchy, she'd revealed her own character to everyone who mattered in her social world. Update 3. 3 months later, the dust has mostly settled, but the relationships have fundamentally changed. My sister and I haven't spoken since that night, and honestly, I'm fine with that. She made her choice when she decided to humiliate me for her own entertainment, and now she's living with the consequences. The most surprising development has been how this incident has affected the broader family dynamics. My parents have started treating me with more respect, almost like they're seeing me clearly for the first time in years. They've made an effort to include me in family planning, to ask my opinion on things, to acknowledge my success without qualification. My relationship with my nephew has continued to grow stronger. We have dinner once a month now, and he's even started asking for career advice as he prepares for college. He's interested in technology, partly because of our conversations, and I've been helping him understand different paths in the industry. My niece has been more distant, probably because she's closer to her mother and has heard a different version of events. But even she seems less dismissive when we interact at family gatherings. The financial impact on my sister has been more significant than I initially realized. $5,000 was apparently a real strain on their budget, especially coming at the same time as some other unexpected expenses. Her husband's law practice has been slower lately, and they've had to make some lifestyle adjustments. But more than the money, it's the social fallout that's really affected her. She's had to find a new regular restaurant because she can't face going back to Vincenzo's. Several friends have made comments about the incident, some supportive, others clearly judging her behavior. Her father-in-law still brings it up occasionally, using it as an example of poor judgment and family dysfunction. I heard through my nephew that she's tried to reach out a few times through intermediaries, testing the waters for some kind of reconciliation. But she's never actually apologized or acknowledged what she did wrong. Instead, she continues to frame it as a misunderstanding or an overreaction on my part. For my part, I've moved on completely. The promotion has opened up new opportunities, and I'm thriving in my career. I've made new friends through work, started dating someone wonderful who appreciates me for who I am, and generally build a life that doesn't require validation from people who see me as less than. The restaurant incident has become something of a legend in my social circle. When I tell the story at parties, people are universally shocked by my sister's behavior and impressed by my response. It's become a perfect example of how to handle family bullies, not with anger or revenge, but with calm boundary setting and natural consequences. Looking back, I think that night at Vincenzo's was exactly what I needed. It crystallized years of subtle disrespect and dismissive treatment into one clear moment where I could finally respond appropriately. My sister thought she was putting me in my place, but instead she revealed exactly who she was to everyone watching. Sometimes the best revenge isn't planning something elaborate or cruel. Sometimes it's just refusing to enable bad behavior and letting people face the natural consequences of their choices. My sister wanted to exclude me from the family table, so I excluded myself from the family bill. The symmetry was perfect. I still get invited to family gatherings, and I still go when I want to see my parents or my nephew. My sister and I are politely civil when we're forced to interact, but there's no relationship left to repair. She burned that bridge when she thought humiliating me would be entertaining. The folding chair by the trash can was supposed to be a symbol of my place in the family hierarchy. Instead, it became the moment I decided I deserved better treatment and was willing to enforce that boundary. Walking away from that $5,000 bill wasn't just about the money. It was about walking away from a dynamic that had never served me. These days, when I go out to celebrate achievements or milestones, I choose who I want at my table. And everyone who sits there knows they're valued and welcome. It's a much better way to live.